Welcome back, everybody. This Week in America. Thank you for joining us. Website thisweekinamerica.us. As mentioned, our guest on the program, Bob Ryan, one of America's most respected sports reporters, writers, and columnists. He retired from daily work at the Boston Globe in 2012. After some 45 years at the paper, he's the author of many books, including 48 Minutes, A Night in the Life of the NBA. He may have to go back and change that to 44 Minutes, A Night in the Life of the NBA. The Four Seasons, Wait Till I Make the Show, Baseball in the Minor Leagues, and the Boston Celtics, The History, Legends, and Images of America's Most Celebrated Team. He continues to appear regularly on various ESPN shows. And his new book, and this book is an excellent read, it's called Scribe, My Life in Sports. Our guest on the program, Bob Ryan. Bob, welcome to This Week in America.
Well, thanks, Rick. I appreciate it.
I love the book, and if you can clear 5 or 6 hours, we'll go through and do justice to the book here, or we'll touch the surface and you can go buy a book. It's available all across the country. It's called Scribe, My Life in Sports. And it's interesting, the beginnings. This love of sports really came out of your dad, who was involved in sports in the Trenton, New Jersey area as well.
He was a very well-known local person involved in various aspects of sport, marketing, promotion, etc., and was a founder of a local semi-pro basketball league, one of the founders of the local grammar school league, which is still ongoing in the Catholic schools there, and was the reason why I did what I did, in that I know there was a DNA transferal there, genetic predisposition to do this. I do not remember a time in my life when we were not preparing to go to a game, whether it was high school, college, or professional, and whether it was local or whether it would be in New York or Philadelphia. That's all I knew. And then concurrent with that, I loved reading. I just happened to love reading, and I love writing and reading, and you can't be a writer unless you're a reader. And I love to read the sports pages to verify the game I had gone to. If he took me to a Trenton Catholic game on Friday night, I had to read about it in the paper Saturday morning, or else in my mind it had no validation. And that's just the way I was programmed, and so it was kind of natural for me to drift into this way of life.
And you were born into a great area, Trenton, New Jersey. You're close to Philadelphia. You're close to New York City. You're in a town that had 2 newspapers, so you really could stay up to date on sports and follow a number of teams.
And on top of that, something that I never obviously would think about at the time, nor would anyone in Trenton have ever realized it to think about it. But now in retrospect, I realized it was the television capital of America, and therefore we had access to baseball that no one else had. Therefore, what I'm saying is 40 from Philadelphia, 60 from New York. We got all the channels on there, both of them on the dial. Most people in America were lucky they had the 3 network channels. That's it. We had, therefore, Yankee games on Channel 11, Giants and the Giants on 11, the Dodgers on Channel 9, and the Phillies on Channel 6. So that rather than being restricted to the game of the week, as most America was, we had a saturation of Major League Baseball, not 162 games, but we had plenty of them, that I watched a lot of them. And then when rock and roll hit, because music's my other avocation, we had the Philadelphia and the New York channels both in addition to our own, so we had a saturation there too. So it was a terrific place to grow up in the 50s.
Yeah, I can remember we could pick up in the Detroit-Toledo area, WABC. Did not pick up the Philadelphia station, but grew up listening to, 77 WABC.
Powerful signal, 50,000 watts, clear channel. Yes, exactly. It was a powerhouse. So we got it. We had no trouble getting it in Trenton. And then on top of everything else, we had the Jersey Shore, which was a way of life for countless people in New Jersey and Philadelphia and so forth, and I was able to partake in that as well. So it was a very blissful childhood in that regard. Plus the neighborhood I grew up in, nothing but kids. We played all day long, did everything all together. It was a very nice 1950s childhood in a way of life that no longer exists. You know that. It doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist, and you hate to go back and reflect on that, and the younger people go, yeah, but we got it so much better. Man, I'm not sure, but it's where we grew up, but you were the only kid on the block that could actually recite the infield fly rule. I mean, you were a real sports fan at an early age.
Yeah, and I was one of the guys and girls. We had 2 girls referred to in those days as tomboys. We had 2 of them, both named Patty, and they were part of our mix and our gang, our group. Yes, I was the one who knew the rules.
Let's talk about that first time you wrote a column. I think you're like 11 years old. You sit at the typewriter. You read a column called The Sportster. I think your circulation, you said, might have been one or two, depending on whether family
Yeah.
members would pick it up and read it. And you
Yeah,
actually were doing an assessment, a critique of the Mercer County Parochial Basketball League. This was in 1957-58, and you played in the league. Is that where it all started? Where I sort of like this, and you have to throw a couple Bob Cousy references into the column as well.
That is all true. It's something that was my first attempt at putting down on print what the feeling I had, from reading. That was my first attempt at it. And later, within 2 years, I was at prep school where we had opportunities to write for real and get published in the school publications. And I wound up eventually being the sports editor of the school paper, and that's where I got the nickname that is the title of the book, Scribe, given to me by the football coach. And it just couldn't happen. I was his head manager, but I was also the sports editor of the school paper, and I was a starter on the basketball team. So I was kind of known as the sports guy in this whole class.
Bob Ryan, our guest on This Week in America. The book is Scribe, My Life in Sports. It's available and doing exceptionally well all across the country. It is a great read of his career in sports. Information available, of course, at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Let's talk about, and you say the one difference between you and your dad died tragically at a very, very early age, and he was involved in sports but never quite had that big break. And you've said,
No.
I've had breaks along the way. I mentioned living in an area, living in a household where sports was emphasized. What you got an internship at the Boston Globe where you went on to make a national name for yourself because your roommate turned down the job.
Yes, correct. That was on the rebound, and it was through the auspices of the school public relations department, and before that, the sports information. And he was the guy who had the first call on it, but he did not want to go into journalism's career. He wound up being the sports information director at Boston College for many years, and then a member of the school's public relations. His name is Reed Oslin. He was my roommate, and he had the first call. So when he turned it down, they were able to say, well, we have another candidate. Can we offer you another candidate? And that was me. And that's how it got.
You're kicking around at the Globe, waiting for your big chance, and you get, by the way, you're now full-time, and also, by the way, you're going to be covering the Celtics home opener on Friday night.
Yes, and I had not had any preparation for it in terms of covering in preseason or meeting anybody, including the new coach, Tom Heinsohn. I was thrown into it cold. This is throwing your kid into the water and see if he can swim. They had a feeling that the reason I was picked is that on a staff had nobody interested in succeeding the guy who had done it before. They knew I liked basketball, and I had an affinity for basketball, and that was fine, but I had no idea about the mechanics of covering a team and the reality and the nuances of covering a team. There's no manual for that. And that was all trial and error the first year, and very, intimidating a lot of times. But once I got through that first year, I had my feet on the ground, everything started to fall into place.
It's interesting. You were, about 23 years old when you get this job covering the Celtics, and you talk about it in the book, Scribe, My Life in Sports, and a couple things jump out there. First of all, the game's over with, and you're talking to Oscar Robertson, and you're standing there going, my God, I'm talking to Oscar Robertson.
Correct. That was a moment I remember very distinctly of all the things that happened in a particular evening. And then I was a little slow on the uptake. I missed the first deadline.
Well, that's
early edition. Yeah, and they were very sympathetic. The desk knew the circumstances. I mean, they all knew that this was a very, very a taxing thing for me at that night. And I never missed, I can guarantee you I never missed another deadline. I just miscalculated the time it takes to go to the locker room, the time it takes to come back and write, and I miscalculated. And once was it. Once was enough. I did it and never did it again.
If somebody said, what was the NBA like back in the 60s? In the book, Scribe My Life in Sports, you talk about the fact that the NBA only had 8 full-time employees at that time.
3 of whom were secretaries. And it was a mom-and-pop store. Mom-and-pop standing in the doorway. And Pop with the long trotter knocking a can of corn off the top shelf, at the grocery store. That's it. And now it's an international conglomerate. I mean, there were lots of doubleheaders all around the league. There were teams playing in home games in neutral sites, including the Celtics, who did so right up to 1986. It was a vastly different league than it is now. Low budget, low key, and yet the best basketball players in the world were all there. People did not appreciate the basketball. That's what happened in the 70s, and I have to give full credit to the Knicks. The Knicks of 69-70 focused attention that had never been placed on the league. Even this 11-time champion Celtics did not have the resonance that one New York Knicks championship team had. And that's kind of a sad reality, but it's true. They got the league, people, Madison Avenue, the networks, all headquartered in New York, then focused on the Knicks on basketball, and that was the team that started the league in the direction that and to arrive where it is.
And you talk about excellent players. In fact, you make the case. The difficulty is limiting it to 12 players, but you could put together an all-star team from back in that era, put them up against a current team, and they certainly would hold their own and probably excel.
There's a myth about athleticism and what it is, and there were plenty of athletes who can run and jump and those things as well, and particularly the elite players. First of all, that team would have the edge at center. I mean, no one would argue this. No one contemporarily would possibly argue that Will Chamberlain and Bill Russell are better players than the best center in alive today, whoever that may be. It's either Dwight Howard or Joakim Noah, probably. So, yeah, great players. Oscar Robertson, Jerry West, Sam Jones, and Hal Greer would be a representative backcourt that would not have to fear playing against anybody today. I can assure you. And this is a team composed of people who spent at least 5 years of their career in the 60s. I would put them up against the best teams today.
Bob Ryan, our guest on This Week in America, author of the excellent new book, Scribe, My Life in Sports. In the book, and you talk about the shift in the marketplace, and this pretty well sums it up. You do Michael versus LeBron, and you go back to high school, and you make the case what Michael pretty much was limited. It was a regional player in North Carolina. LeBron in high school, and they started filming the kid in 7th grade. In high school, he's like a national star on ESPN.
It really speaks to how far we've come and how we develop our adolescent players. Michael Jordan was not known outside the state of North Carolina except by people who made a living at these things. But most people did not know who he was until he showed up in Dean Smith's starting lineup. And even in the state of North Carolina, he was hardly the most acclaimed player. And that's that he had played high school ball, period, no AAU, none of that stuff. LeBron's child of the modern era. He's the poster child. He's an AAU pup. His teams won 3 state championships. He was an AAU kid who traveled all over the country, was on the cover of Sports Illustrated in high school, and was hyped beyond belief. And it took a while, but he eventually has lived up to all the hype. Absolutely. They're different. And the reason I did this chapter was that was one difference. The other one is their temperament, entirely different. Michael was a me guy, and he wasn't a me guy. It's not right. The essential essence of basketball is that you got one guy, 5 balls. One ball, 5 guys.
5 guys.
You have to solve that riddle. Michael didn't win, in my judgment, until he learned how to share sufficiently. LeBron, a nice person and a model teammate who liked his buddies and wants to share, didn't win until he grudgingly accepted the responsibility of being the best player on the floor and acted accordingly. And certainly in that first series against Dallas, he did not act accordingly. He shrunk from the responsibility. I didn't want to believe it at the time, but I know now it to be true. And it wasn't until he finally said, okay, I guess I got to take over, and now he's a little more accustomed to doing that he finally got the win. Now, that's my premise. I thought it's an interesting comparison of contrast of the two guys who had both arrived at the same place. Michael, the best player in the game, and they both got there different ways.
You're listening to This Week in America. Bob Ryan, our guest on the program, author of the book Scribe, My Life in Sports. Got a couple minutes left in the program. It's going by, as I knew, way too quickly. You say in the book that you remain a fan of college sports, yes, including the two major sports and the revenue-producing sports of football and basketball. And you also say the NCAA is tearing itself apart. I can't even tell you now, and I read all the numbers, how much a team is making millions of dollars from their own network, how much coaches are making millions of dollars, their bonuses. You get all tied up in numbers now. Where are we with college sports?
It's always been an interesting relationship. Remember that we are the only country on earth that does this. That the Canada is low-key. It's mostly Division III. There's one member of Division II, Simon Fraser, who's in the NCAA. Nobody else does this but America. No other country asks its institutions or permits its institutions of higher learning or encourages its institutions of higher learning to provide entertainment for the masses. No one else does this. So it's uniquely ours, and it's something that we as a nation obviously love. We're addicted to it. Can you tell the people of Alabama tomorrow morning they're not going to have the Crimson Tide? Are you going to tell the people of Kentucky they don't have the Wildcats? I mean, that's the way that's who we are as a nation. But it's a corrupting thing. The money has corrupted everything. The presidents are all ready to grab the money. All common sense has been abrogated with these new conference realignments. What is Rutgers doing in the Big Ten? Absurd. What's Colorado doing in the Pac-12? Absurd. By the way, why is the Big Ten at 12 and the Big 12 have 10?
Yes.
By the way, I mean, it's madness. and it's yet I compare it. And then there's the whole student-athlete thing and the eligibility and paying the players or not paying them, all these attendant things. And I compare it to, I love college sports, but to do so, any of us, is to, frankly, be the equivalent of being in love with a hooker. That's what I say. We all have to suspend a lot of common sense in order to be a college sports fan. But when they kick it off or throw the ball up, we're right there, aren't we?
Well, we are. And then you criticize during the weekend on Saturday you can't get away from the television. And you talk about, the different leagues and the restructuring a couple of years ago. You really needed to sit there on Saturday with a chart in front to remember who's playing in what league. I'm watching TCU the other day, and for a while I can't remember what league they're in.
No, you don't know. As I said, all common sense has been abrogated in that regard. And TCU, it'd be nice to have the Southwest Conference back. But then we all knew who was in the league. But you can't do that anymore. No, you don't know who's in what league. Absolutely, positively. It's somehow it detracts from the overall enjoyment. Now, when March comes for me, my favorite month, okay, all that's aside. It doesn't matter anymore. But to get to March is a lot of pain, frankly.
Well, yeah, and then you're thinking about, okay, Division III, that's what it's all about. And I watch occasionally the rebroadcast of Ivy League football. So you've got Yale and somebody, Lehigh. And you look in the stands, there are 12 people there. So nobody really cares. They want the big Ohio State versus Notre Dame type of game. It's amazing how sports have changed. Out of time, you're going to have to read the book, Scribe My Life in Sports, 11 Olympic Games. You've covered including the Ultimate Fighting Championship. You've covered everything in your career. And it's the only place you're going to probably find out this fact that Tommy Lasorda was thinking about being an NBA referee at one time.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Let people figure it out, find out what that was all about.
Yeah, I had to read it twice to make sure my bifocals were cleaned out. I was getting that correct. The book is called, by Bob Ryan, Scribe My Life in Sports. Bob, it has been a pleasure. I've enjoyed your work over the years, continue to do so, and really appreciate you taking the time to be with us on the program. I love the book. Thank you for joining us.
Well, I'm glad you're enjoying it, and thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You're listening to This Week in America, our website, thisweekinamerica.us.